Hi everybody, welcome to our silly marijuana show. Woohoo! No, there's nothing silly about it. We're going to make so much damn money here today, right before your very eyes. We're going to turn $2 into $6, and $6 into $12, $12 into 24, 24, 24. Who gave me 24, 48, 44, 48, 72?
Are you an auctioneer?
Nope. Nope. But you know what? I'm learning so much about the cannabis industry even today. So here's the thing about the cannabis industry and its evolution from now being legal is like, I went from finding myself as being like, you know, pretty much fairly knowledgeable based on my entire black market history of 20, 30 years duration.
Yes.
Now I find that the science has now caught up and surpassed all of my knowledge. And I've got guys coming in here every day and telling me something that I never knew and basically educating me, which is kind of refreshing on the one hand, because it's always nice to learn something new every day, but also kind of depressing because you find out that this lifelong held belief is actually based on nothing.
Myth.
Myth. No, not myth. Myth.
Okay, so give me a for instance.
For instance, you've seen the proliferation of CBDs being advertised in the mail, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. You get the impression that CBDs are legal everywhere. CBDs are not legal in 50 states. Farm Bill notwithstanding. In fact, the Farm Bill, what it did is it said, okay, federally, CBDs are now a Class 5 scheduled food and drug, not a Class 1 controlled substances. Meaning that the feds are out of your way, but states still have to make it legal or illegal. For example, in Texas, it's not legal to consume CBDs or sell CBDs. It's not legal.
I thought there were 12 or 22 states that it was legal.
Well, so this is the thing. Now, you can't tell what's legal and what's not. So we just talked to some gentlemen in the other room, one of whom will be a guest here tomorrow, and they are very much involved in the California cannabis market, which everybody who comes on the show who has an operation in California likes to describe as the biggest cannabis market in the world. Well, did you know that half the counties in California disallow cannabis operations in their state? You can't. Half the counties, and the other half the counties that do allow cannabis operations within the county borders, half the municipalities in those counties will not allow cannabis operations in the municipality borders. So really, despite having a population of 46, 2, 7, 8, 48, 42 million, whatever it is, the real access to cannabis is probably limited to like a fraction of that. Unless, of course, you drive to a county where it's allowed. Now, that's obviously no big thing, but still, it kind of paints the whole California market in a different picture. Especially when you think that there are, within Los Angeles County borders, which includes the city of Los Angeles, there are 1,000 dispensaries operating today, of which 900 are operating illegally.
Do the authorities know which ones are illegal?
The authorities are in the process of closing them down. So this is the thing. This is probably why MedMen is having a tough time catching a bid, because it's competing with a 9x factor of illegals who obviously don't have the burdens of taxation, obviously don't have the burdens of compliance and testing that add to the cost of cannabis for a fully licensed producer and vendor of cannabis like
do they have the burden? But do they have the burden of proof?
Do they have the bird in the proof?
Burden.
They got a bird in the hand.
Which is worth 2 in the bush.
Well, depends which.
You ever hear that one?
Bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush.
You know what that means, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Be happy with what you got now.
Well, yeah, you can have 2 birds out over there in that tree, but they're not yours. They're in the tree.
A bird in your possession is worth more than 2 in the wild.
Or 10.
Or 10.
2 or 10.
So why did they say a bird in the hand is worth more than 2 in the bush if it could have been 2 in the hand is worth 10 in the bush? Make it more dramatic. That's what I don't understand. So today, funny you should ask.
Okay.
But we had, we're going to talk to Alan Brochstein.
Okay.
And we're going to, Chris Naprawa is going to be here, president of Khiron Life Sciences, trading on the TSX venture under KHRN.
The company looks poised to do some interesting things.
There was another one there that I didn't quite get to.
Ricky in the news.
No, it was at the 3:30 mark. Oh, that was the Alan Brochstein pre-tape, right?
Yeah.
Steve Misener. Steve Misener's here.
Really?
Steve Misener's here to talk about commodities. And then Steve White is going to be here from Harvest. This is the company that just merged with Verano in an $850 million US transaction. And we're going to talk to him about that. And that is some heavy shit going on here. Yeah, so you can see what I mean when I say that we're making money. Hand over fist. But in keeping with our long-held tradition, here is news nurse Ricky Gerwitz reading the news.
Back.
Here are the headlines moving markets today. Origin House announced the launch of Continuum, its wholly owned California-based distribution platform, formed through the operational integration of RVR Distribution and Alta Supply. RVR Distribution is the first locally licensed distributor in West Sacramento, and Alta Supply is one of the first licensed distribution companies in Oakland, California. Continuum will have 3 fully licensed facilities in Alameda, Yolo, and Orange counties and over 90 employees. HEXO Corp has joined Food and Consumer Products of Canada, the largest voice of the Canadian food, beverage, and consumer products industry. 48 North Cannabis Corp has entered into a $25 million bought deal equity financing agreement. The company has signed a letter of engagement with 8 Capital, under which 8 Capital has agreed to purchase 18.4 million units of the company on a bought deal basis, pursuant to a filing on a short form prospectus at a price per unit of $1.36 for gross proceeds of $25 million. The closing date of the offering is scheduled to be on or about April 2nd, 2019. CannaMerica Brands Corp has signed a letter of intent to build a CBD facility in Mexico. The company has created a joint venture with Sericea Labs SA de CV and CBD Distribution Company Limited, with the intention of building a facility in Mexico for importing and warehousing licensed CBD products as well as CBD oils and tinctures destined for refining. When and if permitted under Mexican laws, the companies also plan on acquiring, importing, and cultivating industrial hemp biomass for extraction into CBD isolate to be used for multiple product lines which utilize CBD. Lit Cannabis Corp has entered into an arm's-length letter of intent with TrackLoop Analytics Corp. The agreement was signed in order to trust TrackLoop's technology in their Nevada cannabis operations. TrackLoop's real-time tracking software will be used by the company to monitor the movement of all of the inventory through the supply chain. Chum is entering the United States, starting with the state of New Jersey. Through its wholly owned U.S. subsidiary, Chum Holdings USA Inc., the company has signed a letter of intent to purchase an equity interest in a New Jersey-based medical retail dispensary applicant in New Jersey's upcoming request of applications. Cresco Labs Inc. announced that its shares have been approved for immediate listing on the OTCQX Best Market, the top tier of the 3 markets for the over-the-counter trading of stocks. And that's your news for today.
Gotta love that news, eh, Ed?
Yeah.
Where would we be without the news?
I know. Tidings.
Tidings?
That sometimes they refer to the Bible as glad tidings.
The Bible?
Good news Bible.
Good news Bible?
Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
Is there a bad news Bible? Pretty sure that's what they call the Bible, because it's all bad news there.
I love it when Christopher Hitchens gets in these discussions with these very pro-Bible people,
yes.
and he's sort of the negative, but he's gone now, so.
What do you mean he's gone? He went out for a smoke?
He's passed.
Really? Who?
Chris Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens.
That is.
You don't?
No.
You should Google him sometime and listen to his arguments.
Yeah?
He's very, very, very well spoken.
Articulate?
Very articulate.
Erudite? Knowledgeable?
Yeah.
Generally an all-round good guy.
Gold is flying today.
Really?
And I would have thought it would have been dropped. It's so tough. So tough.
What? Gold?
The whole thing. But it looks to me like, I don't know. I think we're...
How about cannabis? Cannabis is on fire again.
Cannabis, I mentioned that Flower Corp.
Flower Corp.
Want to look at that chart?
Never heard of them. No, of course we have. We've had them on all the time.
I know.
They're one of our favorites. I was just speaking to Jacob Gamble from Ventura, Now, this is a company that's in the top quartile of earnings of cannabis companies, of all the cannabis companies in the world. You know what the market cap is? 27 million.
Yeah.
Do you know what the valuation multiple is of most cannabis companies? 14 times.
14 times what?
14 times earnings. 14 times revenue, actually.
14 times revenue.
14 times revenue.
That's a little disturbing.
That is very disturbing. However, not so disturbing is Ventura is only trading at a multiple of 2 times earnings for their 2019 run rate. So what does this tell you? At 27 million relative to 14 million, Ventura should be worth 100 to 150 million. It's just getting started. Still a market cap of 27 million. Am I calling this an undervalued situation? No, because that would be illegal, and I ain't gonna go there. However, at a $27 million market cap, the chances that it's going to go much higher seem to me very great, considering that all the other companies with earnings trade at a multiple of 14 times.
Well, why is this OSO, for instance, why is this thing sitting down there trading for half its cash value? Or, sorry.
No management?
No management.
Nope. No CEO. Got an interim CEO, but there's no operators there. It's basically in a holding pattern.
So they've raised money. It's basically a shell, a marijuana shell.
Pretty much. Well, I don't think that they'd be happy to hear us say
but
however, but we cannot let the way others feel about what we're saying influence what we're going to say now, can we, Edward? Except the law. If they don't feel very happy about what we're saying, we will definitely change it.
I'll take that back.
Yeah, no, I think the reason that Osoyoos is trading at such a low valuation is because there is not an operating management team in place taking it to the next level.
And they're trying to get licensed, right? They're not licensed.
And they don't have a license, that's right. So that complicates things. It's hard to be a cannabis company if you don't have a cannabis license. I had a great reaction to a whole slew of the audience when I mentioned our private Peruvian corporation.
I know, I saw that.
Inca Cannabis.
Yeah.
And I just want to, rather than address each of you.
Are those the resumes right there?
These are all, no, there was resumes, and there were also a great number of people saying that they'd like to invest in our private Incan Cannabis Corporation. However, it's far too premature to be discussing investment from the public. At this point, it's very much an unbaked cake. It's in process. I do promise our listeners here that they will be the first to know when there is an opportunity. But a lot of the investors apparently watching are accredited investors. Even one gentleman said, and this always warms the cockle of my heart, he said, "James, I've made a lot of money watching your show. I would like to participate in this Incan cannabis thing." Which is, hey, that's great.
How do you, that word, the cockles?
Cockles?
What does that mean?
Well, you know what a cockle is.
No, I don't.
You don't know what a cockle is?
I know.
You know
if you break that word up, I know what that is.
Do you know what they call cockles for short? Have you ever listened to country and western music? You know what they call country for short? I don't like the way you're looking at me there, Ed. Let's stick with the subject matter here.
What about yeah.
I'm going to take a look at my NDI and see if yep, there it is. Okay, so first we're going to look at this. Can we see that? You know what that is? You know what that little picture is right there?
That looks like a familiar.
See if it's going to go. That is my marijuana garden, growing in my secret location.
You're allowed 4 plants.
I'm allowed 4 plants. It's obviously growing in my house.
How many plants you got there?
4. Notice that one in the back is doing really poorly relative to the other 3.
Is that the runt?
That's the runt of the litter. But the runt of the litter.
Is that what you were going to say?
That's the runt of the litter. Well, I wasn't certainly going to use the short form of country,
You know why the runt's the runt, eh?
Yeah. Because it's the smallest.
Because he's always on the hind
tit. What? Suddenly you've got hesitation using the term?
I don't know. I'm jumpy. I'm jumpy.
You're jumpy.
I'm going through a couple of. Never mind.
What are you going through?
Oh, it involves
what?
La Governmente.
Oh, el gobierno. Okay, now let's.
So let's watch. Kronos is up 50 cents.
Well, you want to watch the plants grow a little longer? There they are, growing away.
Can you imagine if you stood there right now and you waited for 3 or 4 months? They would grow before your eyes.
You couldn't see them growing before your eyes? Let's take one more look. Look how big they've gotten since we last chatted. Okay, never mind. Let's look at the markets instead.
Okay.
See, this is a screen I look at every morning. If you're wondering why I'm so confused every day, is because
that looks like mass chaos there.
It is. This is the market at work here. There's my Midas Letter portfolio. Not really intending to show that to the public, but here's the portfolio generally that I like to start off with, which is the list of the. Let's see. We're going to take that one larger. We're going to put this one back over here. All right, here and here and here we have the large caps. So these are the 4 indexes up here, and these are the large cap stocks. So starting with the large cap index, up 1.7% today, or 182 points to 10,891. If we were to look at a chart of that index, which I'm going to try to do here without screwing up my, I'm having a tough time, I'm having a hard morning. I'm going to right click. And no, I can't do it with this look. So, oh, yes, actually, we'll come back to the markets in a minute, but right now we're going to talk to Chris Naprawa, the CEO of Khiron Life Sciences. He'll join me right after this little info bit.
Khiron Life Sciences Corp is a Latin American-based pharmaceutical company that develops and commercializes medical cannabis products. Khiron has core operations in Colombia and is fully licensed in the country for the cultivation, production, domestic distribution, and international export of both THC and CBD medical cannabis. In May 2018, Khiron listed on the TSX Venture, becoming one of the first Colombian-based medical cannabis companies to trade on any exchange globally. Khiron Life Sciences Corp is listed on the TSX Venture under the ticker symbol KHRN.
Chris Naprawa, the president of Khiron Life Sciences, joins me in studio now. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you, James. Glad to be here.
Chris, the stock has been in fire. It has tripled, come back a bit, risen strongly again. The volumes are way up. What is going on behind the scenes at Khiron?
Well, I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that this is cannabis is a global phenomenon. It's not just a Canada thing or a California thing. It's global, and where better to start a business like this than Colombia? The equatorial region where we have no seasons, where it's perfect to grow. Our costs are low. Our ability to attract talent is incredible, and so we've grown a lot, and we have to spend a lot of time helping make sure that people try to overcome their biases and prejudices about certain regions, and just focus on the business. And the business itself is doing very, very well.
Right. So it's been just over a year since Khiron held the Khiron Life Sciences Conference in Bogota, which I was fortunate enough to attend. And at that conference, you had a room of 1,000 people full of doctors from all over the countryside in Colombia. So what has evolved in Colombia in terms of the attitude towards cannabis as a medicine in that year that has passed?
Well, in that year that's passed, think about what we've accomplished. We went public via RTO on the TSXV. We've completed 2 acquisitions. We've done our JV with Dixie. We've done 3 financings. So we've worked very, very hard to grow the company up and add some scale. In Colombia itself, people have always been favorable towards medical cannabis. We proved that through our number of surveys, including our one with Quintiles IMS right from the very beginning. And if anything, those physicians and physician groups are even more likely now to endorse the use of cannabis for certain types of indications for medical patients. In fact, a recent conference that we just had saw 4 of the medical heads from the 4 largest medical associations in Colombia, all at our conference, all endorse Khiron, all endorse medical cannabis. And then more recently, only 2 weeks ago, that same kind of conference that you had in Bogota a year ago, we just did that for the very first time in Mexico City a couple weeks ago, and the response was phenomenal.
Okay, so without doubt, the movement from for pain treatment and for nervous system disorders is moving away from opiates to the benefit of cannabinoids. And so is your progress through Mexico, through Colombia, throughout the rest of Latin America, is it uniform, or is it sort of is it kind of like happening more so in, say, Mexico and Colombia, where you've got more of a presence than it is in other countries, or is it also happening there just as fast?
Well, I think Latin America is a big place,
right?
And things are happening at different paces in different places. But one thing that's uniform is that the toothpaste is out of the tube. There's only one direction that we're going here, and it's more access, not less.
Yeah.
So I think in places like Mexico, we're seeing phenomenal adoption. The big market that I keep talking about for the last several weeks now is Brazil. Even though legislation isn't quite on the books yet, this is a market of 240 million people. They're very, very eager for our solutions. We've got feet on the ground there now. Look for more news out of Brazil for us, because that is the biggest potential medical market in the world. Altacorp just put out a report saying it's the biggest potential medical market in the world.
Right.
So are we going to wait for the day that it's all announced, or are we going to do some work ahead of time? We're going to do some work ahead of time.
Interestingly, our show is we just did a deal with YouTube where we will be doing a regular show each month from the studios in Rio de Janeiro. Mm-hmm. So that's probably where we're going to have to interview you next.
I look forward to it.
Yes.
Rio's an amazing place.
Yes, it is. Okay, so what is the company looking like now in terms of revenue scale, in terms of distribution, profitability, and all of that going into 2019?
Well, you highlight some of our big differentiators. As you know, many of our competitors are very much focused on low-cost cultivation for export into foreign markets, whatever they may be. We've been focused on building a grassroots business from the ground up. So, we're enjoying revenues now not only from our clinical business, which is called iLands. As you know, we might try to replicate that kind of business elsewhere. Our Quita sales started in November. They are growing. We were in. I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek. We did that deal with Pharmatodo. They had exclusive for 4 months. There's about 54, 56 stores in Colombia. I wouldn't be surprised by the end of next quarter that we're in 300 or 400 stores with that product. We have that product now approved in Peru. We've got certain of those products approved in Mexico. You're going to see them elsewhere. So, getting to 2,000 or 3,000 doors over the next year or so, it would be, I think, a goal that we would strive for.
Sure. So I just want to zero in on that a bit, because the cosmeceutical segment is something that is tremendously overlooked by the vast majority of the largest cannabis companies in the world. And the fact that you've already launched sales and growing into such a huge market in Latin America, to me, smacks of this is a whole new path and trail being blazed that, in consideration of the totality of what Khiron is today, seems that even at the current valuations, you might be a little bit undervalued.
Well, I might not be the first executive on your show to claim that we're undervalued, but certainly if you look at the opportunity in front of us, I think we are. And for guys like yourself who have been great supporters and friends right from the very, very beginning, as I'm noticing some of these pictures are very, very old, James. We'll get you some updated B-roll for next time I'm on. We've grown very, very steadily. We've made acquisitions. We've expanded our markets. We've established a dominant position in Latin America, which was always our goal. And whether you measure that by revenue, employees, jurisdictions, licenses, I think we can stand up to that kind of scrutiny. But the signal that we're trying to give to the markets now is look out, we're coming on for the rest of the world. So this week in Bologna, Italy is the largest cosmetic show in the world, called Cosmoprof. We're the only company of our type that is there. Just to give you an idea of the scale, there's 200,000 registered buyers that are going to be there, not attendees, but people that buy cosmetics. And we're one of the few companies of our type that are there, and we're going global. What better place to start a global cannabis business than Bogota, Colombia?
Sure, fantastic. There's been a couple of other names start circulating on the street trying to raise money, but I don't know that they've had that much success. Is there any competition in Colombia or Latin America that's noteworthy at this point?
No, absolutely. Money is starting to flow in, and I think that's a good thing for us. It means that people are getting more and more comfortable. If you think back 2 years ago, trying to raise money for a startup Colombian cannabis company was not the easiest thing. But now that we're starting to see big brand names flow into our country and our region, rather, I think that's a really good thing for us. Again, a lot of them have a different business plan than us, focusing more on the B2B commodity type business. And I think that business has a lot of merit, and it has a lot of legs, and it's some business we may enter into at one point in time. But we're a vertically integrated branding CPG company. That's what we want to be.
Okay. There's some questions from our audience. A gentleman is asking, what is the status of the joint venture between Dixie Brands and Khiron at this point?
Dixie's an amazing JV. Dixie's an amazing company. It's been around for 9 years. They're based in Denver, Colorado. Chuck Smith, the CEO, has amazing vision. And that business, we announced that JV is consummated. You should see very, very shortly that business has been concluded and that we're going into commercial operations. To give you the viewers an idea, there's 15 brands there. There's over 100 SKUs. There's probably another 200 SKUs and formulations that we have access to, and that's for our entire region. That's everything south of the Texas border. So Dixie is a phenomenal company with wonderful people. There's an amazing cultural fit between the two organizations, and I think this business, this JV, gives us maybe a 2 or 3 year head start on what we could do organically.
Okay, and another question from Larry Limo. Wants to know, when will you be starting construction of a facility in Uruguay?
So first of all, we're going to conclude that acquisition. Again, we're kind of hours and days away from concluding that. We'll be setting a scope and scale for building that business. And we're coming at it for now with 2 years of experience in building our own cultivation facilities and our new 15,000 square foot purpose-built GMP lab facility, which is the only one of its type in our region. Can't wait to have you down to see that one as well. There's nothing like it in the region, and it's on par with anything you'd see anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere.
Right. Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, so is Khiron looking to supply the whole world in its diverse product lines from operations in Latin America, or will it actually diversify in terms of operational footprint to other parts of the world?
Well, one of the CEOs that you had on once said that we're all regulatory companies that sell cannabis, and I think if you really pay attention to the regulations in each country, it's clear to me that most of these countries and most of these governments want to have as much of the value chain in their own borders as possible. So we respect that, and if we're going to be the kind of company that we really want to be, we're going to have to be of a certain size in each one of those regions. So in Mexico, we just hired a country manager, is going to be run by Mexicans, and Chile is run by Chileans, and when we go to Europe, it'll be run by Europeans. And to think about how far we've come with 250 employees now just in Colombia, we're going to replicate that in Brazil, we're going to replicate that elsewhere. So no, do I think you can have one big hub and spoke it out to the world? I don't think that business works. I think we have to have feet on the ground and understand the nuances of each individual region.
Mm-hmm. Okay, outside of Latin America, where do you have your sights set?
Well, I think Europe's the next big fighting ground for us. I'll be taking off for there in the next couple of days. We've got people on the ground there now. Again, things are deregulating at an incredible pace around the world. People are realizing that not only are these products safe and effective, but they also provide a revenue base for these governments that they so dearly need. So I see more, not less, and we want to be able to attack those regions. And if you think in Spain and Portugal, we have an advantage from a language standpoint and a cultural standpoint. That's a major starting point compared to the frozen tundra that we live in.
Yeah, that's true. Are there any sort of barriers coming up in the rollout of the whole cannabis legalization proposition in Latin America?
No, I think it's the opposite, James. I think the barriers are coming down. I think acceptance is going up, and maybe in a couple places it might take one more generation to be fully adopted and people to understand the nature of these products. Mm-hmm. But I think the toothpaste is out of the tube. I think we're on our way now. With a very, very few exceptions, I'm more excited about this business than I've ever been.
Okay, that's great. All right, we're going to leave it there now, Chris. We'll come back to you again soon. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, James.
Up next, Alan Brochstein is going to join me via Skype from Houston, Texas. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com. Alan Brochstein joins me now from 420 Invest. Alan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Good to see you, James.
You too. Alan, there's never a dull moment in the cannabis space these days, and we've seen some interesting things happening. Let's start with the resignation of FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb. What prompted that?
Yeah, I don't know what prompted it, but it definitely has implications for the U.S., both maybe the cannabis industry, but certainly the CBD from industrial hemp aspect. And just as a reminder, when the Farm Act was signed back in late December, Gottlieb, who's really very well respected, immediately penned a statement kind of asserting the authority of the FDA to regulate CBD. And, CBD's been in a gray area for quite some time. And everybody wants to see some clarity. Obviously, the markets are growing. We have some public companies. We can track their progress and see the sales. We all read the same things. It's like a superfood. It's really hot right now. But the regulatory environment is very questionable. And one of the things that came out even beyond the FDA aspect is, we realized very quickly that each state has to pass its own laws regarding hemp. Like you have Village Farms talking up Texas, for instance, but Texas, it's not yet legal. So you have to get these laws through. Similarly, canopy growth is in New York, and Canopy Growth was really excited about the hemp opportunity, and they're a little bit more tempered in the near term now because of what's going on. And so Scott Gottlieb wasn't against CBD, but I think he wanted the companies not to make health claims, and he wanted regulation. And so he had scheduled meetings, or said that there were going to be meetings in April to discuss this, open hearings, and then he suddenly stepped down. So it just throws some uncertainty into this. It's, for now, it's business as usual for the existing companies. A lot of players on the sidelines, some starting to jump in now, maybe a little bit prematurely. I think we're headed in the right direction, but this may slow things down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So then, should we infer from Scott Gottlieb's resignation then that he resigned under pressure due to his pro-CBD stance, or the opposite?
I don't think it's related. In the cannabis space, we always want to think the world revolves around us, but I don't know exactly what the issues are. It may have been to just literally spend time with his family. He'd been doing it for 2 years, and they just named a acting FDA head now. So I don't think his departure had anything to do with his views on cannabis or CBD at all, but certainly has some implications because, there was this mistaken assumption that CBD was a free-for-all. It's legal. Let's go. And in fact, that's not the case. And so you have companies like that are focusing more on the cosmetics aspect and not the in-your-body stuff. You've seen several states around the country and also localities kind of stop the practice of adding CBD and selling it commercially. So there's just this uncertainty, and unfortunately, it's going to linger.
Mm-hmm. So then it's common to see people making claims that CBD is legal in all 50 states, and you're saying that is not the case.
It's never been the case. I've been listening to this for a long, long time. And if you mean by legal that you can ship it into all the states and not get arrested, that's probably correct, but that's not the proper term for legal. So in practice, it's been shipped to all 50 states, but it is not legal. And especially after the Farm Act, it really pushes it down to the states. So there's no federal problem with growing hemp anymore, but the states have to regulate it. So the CBD part makes it even a little bit more complex. And so there's a big debate going on about how to interpret certain laws, and there's been exemptions if you imported it in the past. The Farm Act of 2014 kind of allowed some companies to push the envelope and start growing in places like Kentucky or Colorado or Oregon and shipping it into other states, across states. But to categorically say, oh yeah, this was legal, I don't think so. You can find opinions that it's legal. You can find opinions that it's not. I think the reality is it's very, very much gray, and there needs to be some work done to clarify this. And once they do, it's going to make a more vibrant market. I think it's very important. I'm here in Texas. I'm sure many of your listeners know that. And in Texas, we actually have a legal CBD program. It's only for children with epilepsy. And so obviously it's not doing very well. Those patients can buy CBD from outside of the legal program, or they can get a prescription now from GW Pharma for Epidiolex. So it's been interesting to kind of watch the way the media down here has been discussing this, because you can go to a gas station and buy CBD in Texas, and it's not fair to the licensed companies that are limited to selling their CBD only to children with epilepsy. And there's a greater issue that there's just not regulation. So, there have been plenty, you said people make claims, that happens. There are plenty of examples. The FDA has even called out some companies for selling CBD with alleged CBD that had no CBD in it. These products had no CBD at all. So I think everybody would be better off with a more regulated environment. And I'm sure, there's some good actors in the hemp from CBD space that have been at it for a long time. And I think that those companies are going to be well positioned, and it will actually be good for them once these regulations are in place. It's going to make it hard for many of these fly-by-night operators to persist.
Yeah. So the CBDs were rescheduled by the Drug Enforcement Administration from a Class 1 narcotic to a Schedule 5, basically administered by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Does that sort of make it where it's no longer worthwhile for the criminal elements of the U.S. law enforcement system to pursue it? Because, okay, now it's not Schedule 1, so as a violation of Class 5 scheduled food and drugs, it's more just a fine or a misdemeanor, so therefore it's not being enforced so egregiously?
Yeah, I don't think federal enforcement is really the issue right now. I think it's more, I think good companies want regulatory clarity. So it's not about they're worried about getting arrested. They just, you're building a big business, you're Coca-Cola coming in the CBD business, they want this regulatory. They don't want to start adding CBD to their products and then find out they're not allowed to. What we're seeing across the United States right now is a lot of local enforcement. And sometimes it's really out of ignorance, but sometimes, for example, Nikki Fried, who is the agricultural commissioner in Florida, said as recently as last week that they're going to crack down on CBD sellers in Florida because it's not yet legal in Florida, back to your point earlier. So it's really, I think the what you're talking about, the enforcement, is really coming more at the state and local level, James.
Sure. Is there anywhere we can see a list of states in which it is in fact legal to produce CBD products and sell them versus those states that it's still not?
Yeah, I don't have that list. I bet it exists, but here's the problem. So certain states are saying, well, they're not saying anything about mail order and things like that, but like in New York City, they said you can't put it in food like they were doing, or in coffee or beverages. So I think it's extremely murky, and if anybody's looking for clarity right now, good luck to them. They're not going to find it.
So there was a bar in Brooklyn in New York, I heard, that was actually, they were selling drinks, coffee drinks with CBDs in it. And so I guess now that New York has come on side with medical legislation, now they're enforcing that can't be actually added to drinks. Is that right?
That's what I'm hearing. So yeah, it's a crazy world. So I think the big takeaway for listeners should be CBD is a great opportunity, but it's a lot has to happen for the market to develop properly. And there's separate from that, there is so much stock market hype when it comes to CBD. It's like the barriers to entry to be a CBD stock are zero. The barriers to entry to be a real company are higher than zero, but to be a stock, it's easy. We see it all the time, just overnight. Yeah, we're a CBD company now. So I think investors need to be careful about that. And it's not, many of these companies will have zero chance of succeeding, in my opinion.
Sure. So then among the publicly traded entities in the space, which ones do you think are the best contenders for succeeding in the CBD market? I mean, Charlotte's Web comes to mind as the very first company that actually came into existence as a result of their creation of a CBD product to treat Dravet syndrome, epilepsy, childhood epilepsy in a resident of Colorado. So I look at their product offering. They're actively selling CBDs through the mail in states where it's legal. I'm assuming they don't where it's not legal. And so what companies like Charlotte's Web are sort of in the same peer group?
Sure. So the three that I follow most closely would include Charlotte's Web, of course, and also CV Sciences, which reports this afternoon, and then Elixonol Global. Those are the three I follow the closest. I track some other private companies that I think have similar reputations to those three companies for their products, but those companies all, in my opinion, each of them is well managed, has a good product, strong revenue growth, good financials. I think investors, really the only debate about those companies would just be, is it the price right? And so when you get past that, there's some interesting new entrants. What Green Growth Brands is doing with these mall kiosks, and they're focused on a different subset of products on the cosmetics side. But I think that's pretty fascinating with what they're doing in the malls with their CBD store, Seventh Sense. And then there's a company called, I was just looking at it. LEVB is the symbol. I can't believe I'm blanking out on the name, but this is a relatively new company that Kathy Ireland founded the company, I believe, or she's certainly involved with it. She's not running the company. But they did a reverse merger with a company called CBDMD. Yeah. And they have, I think that's an interesting company. Again, it's too new to tell, but they have revenue, but it's not in the same league as those other three that I mentioned. There's some others I'm tracking, James.
Sure. Yeah, Level Brands is the company you're making reference to.
That's it.
I interviewed the CEO from Level Brands last year prior to their acquisition of the CBD company, which was interesting. So there's lots.
They were dealing with Isodial, James, back then, probably when you interviewed them.
Right.
They were distributing Isodial products, and that deal blew up. Every deal for Isodial seems to blow up.
Oh well. Well, that's the thing about the stock market. Here today, gone tomorrow.
Yep.
All right, Alan. That's great input as per usual. I really enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Okay, take it easy, James.
Thanks. If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment. Steve Misener joins me now, chartered financial analyst extraordinaire, man about town, bon vivant. Steve, how are you?
I'm good, James. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Steve, now you have pretty good depth of expertise in looking at the commodities, the currencies from the global perspective and what that means for our economy going forward. Let's start the conversation with a look at currencies. What's going on with the US dollar relative to all of the other ones?
Well, the dollar has been in a rising trend of late. It's trading around 97 on the trade-weighted dollar base or the core dollar index. But I think there's been a bit of a battle. I mean, people were buying it because it had the strongest economy in the world, and it may still, although we're seeing some slowdown in the first quarter. Also because the Fed had previously, up until meetings of a week or two ago, they had been indicating a continued trend of rising rates and leading the world. That made the currency more attractive for investors to be buying into a currency where there will be higher and higher treasury yields on the short term.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what about our Canadian dollar?
Well, the Canadian dollars, the hands are tied much more for the Bank of Canada governor here because we've already got a pretty weak dollar in the 75 cent compared to the U.S. range, and our economy is not nearly as strong as the U.S. And but while the U.S. was raising rates, the Bank of Canada needed to continue to raise rates in tandem to support that our dollar didn't go any lower. It's down 36% exchange rate or so, and yet our economy is weaker than the U.S., so it doesn't really warrant higher interest rates, and yet you have to go in tandem to defend the currency. And since real estate's been one of the big drivers of the Ontario economy and other parts of the country, it's very, very interest rate sensitive. So you've got that double whammy of possibly defending the dollar with a higher rate when the economy can't handle it the way that the U.S. can, and also when you've got risk of the real estate sector being so impacted by it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so is the Canadian dollar then continuing to suffer weakness because the price of oil continues below $60 at $56.92 at this hour today, and our economy still relies heavily on oil?
Canada still will always and heavily perceived as a petrocurrency, even though we have a much more diversified economy than some other oil producers, which are really even more oil dependent. But internationally, we're still perceived both as a commodity-based currency, like Australia, and also heavily a petrocurrency. So a stronger price of crude would certainly be supportive of a higher dollar.
Mm-hmm. In the real estate, I mean, prices have started to drop in the major markets across the country in Canada. So is that being perceived as a threat that's materializing in a weaker Canadian dollar?
I don't think at this point, I don't think that link is direct yet, although it's hard to say about the foreign capital flows strictly to real estate, because also our stock market and other factors of foreign money coming in. Remember, at 75 cents to the US dollar for the Canadian currency, it's not great for Canadians who have their core of their net worth in Canadian dollars. But for foreigners, Canada continues to look in some respects like it's on sale. So even as real estate prices gapped up so much in the last few years, and there were extra taxes and fees laid on for foreign buyers, the Canadian dollar went down. And so you got a 36% drop for foreign buyers if they use the U.S. as the reference currency to buying in Canada against some higher fees. So you could argue that foreigners still might find Canadian real estate attractive, but I mean, it's been so overheated, and it's a 20-year bull market beginning in the late 90s.
Sure. To what extent would you concur with the idea that the Canadian real estate market hype has been fueled by Chinese foreign investment that might now see a diminished level of entry into Canada thanks to the problems that the Canadians and Canada and China are having on a macro political basis?
Personally, and I have no specific knowledge of this, but I don't think the attraction of Canada for perhaps Chinese expats to either invest here as a safe haven for real estate investment long term, or possibly to work towards citizenship here through the economic programs that are available federally. I don't think the current spat over the highway Huawei, thank you, situation. I don't think that's material. I mean, I don't think that's material at all, in my personal opinion. I think that nobody will really care if they're investors on that front. I mean, that's a very targeted situation, and as long as people, I suppose, don't cross the Americans, I don't think it's a factor. Right.
So what about the tendency towards raising taxes, a foreign buyer's tax on real estate that is not occupied as principal residences that has now been levied in both Vancouver and Toronto? Do you think that's having an influence on real estate prices and the volumes of real estate flow in Canada?
I'm sure at the margin it may have some impact, but if the foreign buyer is people of substantial net worth and they're buying strategically because Canada is an attractive place both to live and to gain residency and other factors, then it's merely just another cost or another fee. And in the big scheme of things, yes, the governments want their piece of this hot market. In the same way that Toronto added a specific tax to localized buyers on top of a provincial tax that existed, a land transfer tax. It caused a little blip in the market. It was deemed to be concerning, but off the market continues. So I really don't think, other than it being an annoyance, I don't think it's going to particularly slow things down. But again, I don't have specific data on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then let's shift our conversation to gold, which has been strengthening and performing better in the first quarter of 2019 than it has in a number of years. Why is gold starting to look so attractive to so many investors?
Well, I mean, gold is always a question mark in terms of whether it's a long-term store of value, which it seems to be, and an inflation hedge and a crisis hedge and things like that. And if you deem it as a currency in its own right, it's held in okay, but it hasn't been a raging bull market for gold for a long time. But I think what was noteworthy is that recently some charts were published that show that China has been a net buyer, a fairly heavy net buyer in the bullion market since the fall. I'm not sure if it was October or November, and that was after several years of apparently, and it's hard to know if they're truly reporting their accurate activities, but whatever is available showed that they had not been big buyers for several years, or net buyers at all, based on the chart. So the fact that they're stepping in now in the last 3-4 months, month after month, as a big net buyer, that could, and the Chinese are pretty shrewd when it comes to global markets and commodities. That could be a harbinger of a better run in gold here at $1,300. I think it was either Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs that recently forecast $1,400 by the end of June. That's a pretty big move from gold perspective, whether that plays out or not. It also links to possible potential weakness in the U.S. dollar, or at least the U.S. dollar not going up. The Fed has now backed out and commented that they're not going to raise the rates forward, and that's all linked together. There was a promise of up to 4 rate increases, which they've now backed away from, probably prudently. And that was leading to a much higher dollar forecast, and that, of course, is negative for all commodities since they're all based in U.S. dollars.
Do you think that other geopolitical sort of turmoil, such as Brexit, such as, I mean, even in Canada, the OECD is starting to comment on the situation with the Prime Minister's office and potential allegations of corruption there, but you've got all these other pockets of geopolitical instability that sort of seem to add up to an argument that gold is maybe a safe haven that you want to be looking at right now, at least for some portion of your portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something on the forefront to be concerned about, but remember that if we view gold as a currency rather than something separate, it's just a currency that you can't buy treasury bills in and get a yield on. Although if you look at, say, Swiss francs, the short-term, believe it or not, short-term money in Swiss francs has a negative yield, like a 50 basis point.
You got to pay them to hold the money.
Yeah, so 3 months from now you get less Swiss francs back, but that's because it's the king of currencies. So you could compare gold to that as a flat to negative carry currency as well.
Wow. So it's like paying a subscription fee to know that your pile of money is going to more or less be safe.
Yes, or like in gold, you maybe pay a storage fee at the bank to hold your gold, and that's the cost of holding gold. But I think when you think of currencies and gold as lumped into there, it's always just a relative thing. None of them are necessarily certainly the greatest to own, or can be forecast the best to own. Swiss francs have been great lately, but it's a relative thing. So people are looking at the euro versus gold versus the yen versus the pound or the US dollar. So it's always a relative thing, and it's like, which one do I think is going to do better, or which one perhaps do I hate the least? I mean, it's always like that. So tricky. But I think in terms of the Fed having backed away, and they're in a bit of a box because people felt that they were too aggressive in the fall with the rate hikes, and of course the markets certainly reacted very violently on the downside to the rate decision to hike it in December. And it's pretty easy now to say, well, maybe they were too aggressive because the job growth numbers came in a little weak, and the industrial production came in a little lower than expected, although retail sales were strong. But it can be argued that the economy is going to slow on its own anyway, and that 4.2% kind of spike we saw was a one-off in Q2 in the summer reporting. that people have bought their cars and they bought their appliances, and they don't need to buy cars every year. I mean, sure, some do, but most people don't. So it's argued that it could have slowed down on its own. It didn't need to be hit with the hammer. And then President Trump came out, but every president comes out and criticizes the Fed. It's a constant thing, and they do it here as well, criticize the Bank of Canada. But against that critique, the Fed has made a decision, and now they're kind of perhaps politically in a bit of a box where they say, well, we can't look like we're bending to the president's will. But clearly, maybe internally, they say we've overshot on the upside and we've caused perhaps too much of a slowdown. But it's clear that the forecasts for GDP growth have slowed in the U.S., not to a negative, but they're not as overheated. So I think there's some crisis, I wouldn't say crisis management, but there's some spinning going on out of the Fed, but it's always the case.
Right. All right, Steve, well, that's great input as per usual. I really appreciate your coming down here today, and we'll have you back soon. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure, James.
Let's talk about Aurora. Recently, your financials, you've more or less delivered on.
Here are the headlines moving markets today.
If you're lucky to buy it 3 days ago at 37 cents,
and I think it has a lot to do with some of these smaller names giving really...
Recreational cannabis is here.
It's quite dry. So I'm going to eliminate the stocky bits.
That is one sharp commercial. Hey?
Yes.
Yes. So we had Alan Brochstein first, and then we had Steve Misener.
Yeah. So a lot of alleged CBD is being sold, but it's not CBD.
Well, like any hype or craze, there's all kinds of fraudulent motherfuckers out there robbing people, separating people from their hard-earned cash, and the CBD industry is no different, especially when you take a substance. Now, don't forget, up until September of last year, CBD was a Class 1 controlled substance in the United States, meaning it had no medical value and had automatic implications for incarceration should you be found in possession of it. Now it's been reclassified to a Schedule 5 food and beverage drug, which means that it's nothing more than a misdemeanor for you to be caught selling it without a license or without a prescription. So now you've got every pumping, dumping, multi-level marketing fool in the world who can string an email together out there trying to sell CBDs, just like they were selling Viagra, Cialis, all these different things that make great promises but fail to deliver. CBD is another case in point. However, CBD in the right concentration, in the right purity, has profound implications for health, the magnitude of which are just starting to be recognized by science, because up until September, science could not delve into this without very specialized procedures for access. Now, this is why Israel, of all the countries on the planet, is at the forefront of scientific research in terms of the human organism, and continues to be, because Raphael Mechoulam at the University of Jerusalem first started to study cannabis back in 1963, not coincidentally, the year that I was born. And I think I might have been born a cannabinoid. No. Anyways,
So 63?
Yeah.
Is he still alive?
He's still alive. We actually did an interview with him for our documentary film, which will be released in 2020.
How old is he?
He's getting up there.
Like 100?
No, he's not 100.
Okay.
But he's getting up there. But anyways, so a lot of the research that post-secondary institutions are conducting into the medical benefits of cannabinoids are based on his body of research. So.
Well, the Israelis, they're very thorough. There's no question.
Yes. Did you happen to be catching on Netflix the show called the Mossad, Inside the Mossad?
No. Good one?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Israeli operatives of the Mossad are being questioned from a moralistic viewpoint by the interviewer about, you know, how can you actually deploy men and women to kill these people, and the interview subjects, who are operators, senior management of Mossad, are just kind of like chuckling to themselves and said, yeah, we did it and we're going to do it again, and we don't really care what the rest of the world thinks. This is the Mossad. So I was just like, ooh, that's
their secret police, right?
Well, that's their CIA equivalent.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
interesting story. What else we got going on today here, Edward? It's 4 o'clock. The markets are closing.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at markets in our neighborhood.
All right.
And see who the biggest performers are. And then we're going to have a chat with a gentleman by the name of Steve White, who is the CEO of Harvest Health and Recreation. Actually, we're going to start with that conversation, and we'll come back to the market close data. But Steve White joins us now via Skype.
Harvest Health and Recreation Inc. is a vertically integrated cannabis company with one of the largest footprints in the U.S. The company has recently entered into a binding agreement to acquire Verano Holdings, LLC, one of the largest privately held licensed operators of cannabis facilities, for an estimated purchase price of $850 million U.S. The deal is one of the largest U.S. cannabis consolidations in history and will give Harvest the right to operate up to 200 facilities across 16 states and territories. Harvest Health and Recreation is listed on the CSE and trades under the ticker symbol HARV.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great, Steve. This was quite a transaction, and we've never seen anything like it before. Can you tell me how this happened?
So this one was a long time coming, actually. And it's a conversation. We went public in November. We've been having this conversation with Verano. I guess it started last summer. And we had talked about a combination back then. The timing wasn't right because of our, our transition towards the public markets. So there was a set of events that allowed this to become possible. We re-engaged the conversation. We were able to pull it together.
Fantastic. So this was driven by Harvest One from the beginning?
Actually, Harvest Health and Recreation. Harvest One is a Canadian company, a lot smaller than ours.
Okay, right. Okay, so you're operating 200 different locations. And so how is it that, like, so these are obviously all in places where it's legal. So which was the bigger company in terms of manpower?
So Harvest Health and Recreation was the larger company. The combination is about a 70-30 Harvest to Verano. Verano had about 300 or so employees, and Harvest had about 600 employees. Harvest had, the rights to operate 130-ish licenses, a little more than that, closer to 150, and Verano brought about 40 licenses to the table.
Oh, okay. So what is the game plan now in terms of catalyzing value for shareholders?
Yeah, so that's the trick, right? An acquisition is only so good as the integration is. And so while we think the assets are great and this acquisition only works if we're able to integrate the company seamlessly and work towards a common mission. So that has so far been the emphasis of our conversations. I mean, obviously getting the deal done and getting the final touches put on that is significant, but we've been talking about integration for months now, actually.
Okay, so you're well down that path.
We are, yeah.
All right. Who are the main backers of what kind of banking relationships did you have to pull together to make this happen?
So in terms of traditional financing, there wasn't any. The bank that represented us in the transaction was 8 Capital out of Toronto, and so they've been representing us for quite some time. and they did a lot of the analysis. They also did a fairness opinion for us for the transaction.
Okay, so now you've got a whole bunch of, well, essentially you've got access to 150 million American consumers from your various locations. You've got 300 employees, 900,000 square feet of grow space in Illinois, Nevada, and Maryland. And so the valuation of the entire enterprise, I mean, how did you arrive at that valuation?
It's funny that you asked that question. The very first conversation that we had with Verano was a conversation about what the appropriate relative valuation between the companies was, and this was last summer. And it was one of those conversations where in 15 minutes we came within 2 or 3 percentage points of what the right answer was. And so the two companies have both grown. Fortunately, they've grown at similar rates. So we ended up doing the deal at awfully close to the same relative valuation as we had back in the summertime, actually. So that part of it was not, wasn't a labor-intensive conversation or a difficult one, because the two companies get along really well, and the principals like each other, and we all have common goals about what we want to achieve in the U.S. cannabis industry.
Right. Okay, so then in terms of getting this through to closing, is there any anticipated resistance in either group of shareholders?
No, actually, it appears as though the market has received the news well, and all of the feedback that we've received from investors and feedback that they've received from their investors has been very positive.
Okay, so now that you're essentially the largest U.S. multi-state operator on the planet, what's next for the combined entity? I guess it's just deliver value and execute on your business plan.
Yeah, it's that, and it's continuing to grow. I mean, while we are presently, we have the most licenses under our umbrella and the opportunity to build more facilities than any other U.S. player, that doesn't mean we're stopping. There are gaps in our portfolio, and there are new states that are going to come online all the time. And so it is important for us to strenuously continue the process of growth. And then while we are doing that, also being mindful of the integration and actually executing on all of these licenses that we now have under the umbrella.
So would further acquisitions be the sort of preferred strategy, or is it to grow organically from within?
The preferred strategy would be organically, because of the return on invested capital is unrivaled there. And so as a company, we've been very good at winning licenses rather than acquiring other companies. And so we hope to continue to do that over time. Verano, by the way, is also very good at that process as well. But the rate at which we must grow requires that we do more than just organically acquire licenses. We have to also make accretive acquisition. And I would have to think that the landscape for acquisitions, I mean, from my perspective, I watched some of the acquisitions by some of the multi-state operators and thought that they were very rich. And I imagine they have to be rich because at this point it's kind of a seller's market. If you've got a very successful cannabis business, be it a cultivator, extractor, a seller, a deliverer, a dispensary, that you're going to be able to command a multiple when larger MSOs come knocking, because they can only survive through acquisition if they don't have the ability to grow organically. And so are you finding that the valuations of the range of candidates for acquisition are difficult to deal with in terms of their self-perceived valuations? There's a saying that we always have, that everybody loves their valuation and hates everybody else's. So there is some truth to that. But for us, it's more of a state-by-state analysis about whether or not it's a seller or a buyer's market. There are some states that have terrible sellers, and other states where there are people that are quite reasonable. So you have to continue to be diligent. And those conditions change quite regularly, so we have to have people on the ground in a number of states.
Right. And can I ask, Steve, what's your background? How did you come to the cannabis space?
I was a lawyer before the law passed in Arizona in 2010. I got involved at that time both as a lawyer and as an entrepreneur, and then ultimately transitioned away from law. By 2013, I was doing exclusively cannabis work for Harvest.
Cannabis does seem to have that effect on otherwise law-abiding citizens. And I'm kind of joking there, but okay, sounds really interesting. And all right, the future of such a large operator kind of puts the whole market on notice that, you know, big money is coming to this space. And so, I mean, it's kind of made our job on the buy side kind of difficult, because now people are, you know, again, I hate everybody else's valuation. I like my own, but it's making it tough to deal with people who, you know, refuse to budge on their valuation, and they point at an entity like the combined Harvest deal and say, well, there's my peer group. So if you don't like it, then don't buy it, and that's the end of the conversation. But I guess that's just part and parcel of the evolution of a bull market and a new commodity sort of segment, if you will. Do you have any ambitions to expand to Europe or elsewhere in the world once federal deprohibition ends in the United States and banking is normalized?
So one thing that cannabis has taught us is that we never say never. But at this point, we are concentrating on the U.S. opportunity. There are so many states that haven't gone medical, and then a number of states that are medical that haven't gone recreational, that the opportunity here, I think, is unrivaled. So we're going to do everything we can to take advantage of that U.S. opportunity. And for the time being, we are viewing global opportunities more as distractions than opportunities.
Interesting. All right, Steve, I could talk to you for hours because I don't really know you that well, but we're going to cut it off there. I'd like to come down with a camera crew and shoot some of your flagship operations, if that's okay.
We'd love to have you out.
Awesome, Steve. Great. We'll leave it there. We'll come back to you in due course. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
So you put that, this is another one of these major deals, right? Where,
well, this is the major deal of the market. I mean, in terms of internal combinations of companies. I mean, what else is there? Well,
so I'm not familiar with the other company that
Verano.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but I was confusing this harvest with the harvest that we've interviewed in the show, and it's only when I look at this guy and I'm like, I haven't seen him before, and then I realize, oh, okay, this is one of those huge multi-state operators that I just haven't come across yet. But this is the problem with being, you know, the rate at which the industry grows. No single entity can keep track of it all, and so I guess we're just going to have to get used to that. But $850 million.
So Verano, because I don't even know the company. I've never.
Well, we're going to start to learn about it now.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that they're in the wheelhouse, but yeah. So, I mean, sign of a robust market. When
this is capped right now at about 660 million.
660 million.
Yeah.
So there's some backfilling to go on there. Yeah, but this again, this is Andy DeFrancesco and Sol Global's handiwork.
Is it
bringing value to the market? Not that there wasn't any, but it looks like
there's
thanks
more
to
now.
Entities like Sol Global, we are going to see this market continue to increase in value. As Jim Moran just pointed out here, one of our guests or one of our viewers, he says Verano was private prior to this, so that's why we haven't heard of them. There we go.
Okay. So that's the answer.
That's
the answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
And what business were they in?
Who?
Verano.
Cannabis.
Okay, but private.
But they were private. That's right.
Private transactions.
They just haven't gone. They hadn't gone public.
So this is a way of going public, basically.
This is a way for them to go public. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of speculations going on. Cresco needs to get LHS because they are the only MSO not in Florida yet. That's an interesting. That's from one of our viewers, Jellybeans 37421. Is that your zip code? That's interesting. And N, our loyal N says, I thought LHS was going to explode. Now, N, can you clarify? Did you mean explode to the upside or blow up, as in disintegrate? Because those two terms are interchangeable in this industry.
Like raise and raise.
Like sun rays?
Like raise a building.
And raisins?
And to raise a barn, you know, you're putting up a barn, but to raise a barn would be to flatten it. R-A-Z-E. Raise.
Good point.
Well,
what do you call that?
You call that two words, I think, that are spelled differently, that are pronounced the same.
Yes.
I think you call them...
But have opposite meanings.
Homonyms.
Pardon?
Homonyms.
Sorry, did you say something before there?
What?
Homonyms? Did you say pronounce that with an H, or was it the H silent?
With an H. What are you laughing at?
Yes,
you ever heard of homonym?
I've heard of it now. No, I've heard of homonyms before.
Yeah. There's antonyms or opposites, synonyms.
So, wait, but this was a word that was a homonym where the two words were opposites.
Should we look it up?
So was this a homonantonym? A homonym?
Ah.
No, because it was an
antonym. That's the national anthem.
And a homonym. What's an antonym?
Yeah.
Raise and raise.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So this is a homonym.
So homonyms are words that are spelt differently, but they're pronounced the same. And this is a opposite homonym.
What does Y-E-S spell?
Yes.
And what does E-Y-E-S spell?
Eyes.
Damn you! Damn you!
You know what? It's easier every time you ask.
Well, one of these days you're going to be so hungover or so high you won't remember it. You'll be like, oh, I remember this one.
What do people normally say? Yes?
Well, a lot of people.
Yeah. What do they say?
Say yes. And they're not quite sure why you're asking them what does E-Y-E-S spell, because they're thinking that's not a word, that's just yes with an E on the front.
Yeah, E-E-S.
And so they pronounce it
like
best.
Email, there's mail and email, there's yes and E-S.
Yes. Brock N, one of our viewers here, says that education on NRTH is required. We look at an NRTH chart?
Yeah, we can. We can, and we're going to do it.
We're gonna.
And you know what? The NRTH really had a big move.
Yes.
And that's CNX, right?
Yeah.
And I think today it corrected.
Yeah.
And?
Well, you know why?
No.
You know why it corrected? Because this morning I got an email from GMP that they announced a bought deal for 48 North for $1.25 a share. So did it go down to $1.25?
$1.42.
$1.42.
4.6 million. But you know, this RSI was up to 90 almost. You know how overbought that is? Look at there's the chart. Look at the RSI down here.
Yeah.
You want me to show you?
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Right here.
Yeah.
That is extremely overbought.
Yeah.
And
that's a good time to announce a financing.
Well, you know they're raising money at $1.25. I mean, what is that? Is that
48 North, $1.36 per unit.
Okay, so $1.36.
Yeah, $25 million bought deal, $1.36.
So now this company is much stronger by virtue of having that $25 million.
And it hasn't closed yet, and there's probably a green shoe.
But a bought deal means it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's done.
Well, it's done.
It's not closed.
No, it's not closed.
But it's done.
But it's done.
Wow.
If the option is exercised in full, an additional approximately $3.75 million will be raised pursuant to the offering. So the total amount that will be raised when it closes, assuming the option is exercised in full, is $28.75 million.
Yeah.
So congratulations to Jeanette and to Allison. They are now cashed up.
They're cashed up.
They're cashed up.
You know, the S&P in the last couple of days has put on a big move.
A big show?
you know, it was having trouble with that 2,800 number, and then rolled over and dropped dramatically last couple days. We've had four or so bad days on the S&P, and now we've covered almost all of it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here.
Pull up a chart. Let's look at that S&P. Show me that S&P. Well,
SPX. Here we go. Here we go.
All right. So
let me put up a 3-month just to give us a little more. Yeah, there we go. See that? See this big? That was that big move. One of the biggest moves in the shortest periods of time, and then little correction. You know, almost down to the lower band, and now we're back to almost the upper band. This is going to be really interesting.
But I would point out that the bands are narrowing, which is usually the sign of an imminent inflection point, the upside or the downside.
That's what I was thinking.
And so, is it going to be up or down based on fundamentals? If you were to be a betting man.
If I was going to be a betting man, what you know, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I kind of think with everything that I'm hearing about and all the things in the world, but they say markets climb a wall of worry, but I have a funny feeling the markets are going to have a tough time getting through there. Now, if they get through there, then I think it's going to challenge the highs.
Throw that chart back up there, will you, boys?
Yeah, let's throw that chart back up there.
Okay, so you're saying that's the
there was resistance. A high here. There was a high here. We came down, broke this trend there, and now we've rallied back to almost that line. But I think we're going to try to test the line, and if it gets through there, then I think it's going to make an assault on the all-time high of last October. Have you you get a sense that the world is slowing down, though, when you hear about what's going on in Europe, mainly? Like Europe,
slowing
Canada.
Down economically?
Yeah.
Well, no.
I thought maybe slow down from a... What other way would it slow down?
Well, I was thinking it's from an economic perspective, you could say slow down in terms of the vitality of the whole global economy as in terms of total output. But if you look at it that way, it's speeding up because the entities producing positive GDP globally are accelerating their output, arguably. And what is the most basic origin of GDP? I'm going to call it population. Because population
Well, if there was no population, there would be no GDP.
Right, and if there was a population stalled in growth, there would be a coincident stall in GDP growth across all nations because the source of all demand is population.
And you know, let's face it, every major country in Europe is not replacing themselves. At least, you know, let's forget about the Middle East and the Spanish because they are, but just about every other nationality is not. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you need 2.2 people in a family of children.
The average reproductive rate needs to be 2.2 to maintain stable population.
Yeah, and it's a lot less in Germany, it's a lot less in France, it's a lot less in England.
But it's way higher in the likes of some countries.
Well, the Middle East.
The Middle East?
Middle East, and Spanish countries as well.
Spanish countries?
Yeah.
Spanish countries breeding like...
Well, I mean, like, for instance, South America.
South America?
Yeah. Well, they're mostly Spanish. There's some Portuguese in there.
Have a problem with that.
I know, and so would
people from Suriname are not going to be
happy. And how about Guyana?
Well, they're British in name only.
Yeah, well.
Because have you been to Guyana?
No, I haven't.
You know what they call the people who are the informal miners there?
Informal miners?
Yeah. Pork knockers.
That was the answer.
Nope, that's not the answer.
What do they call them?
Pork knockers.
Pork knockers.
Pork knockers. There's a little bit of trivia for you.
That's a very little bit.
Yeah. No, it's a very little.
Afria was down today.
Afria was down today.
What do you think of that?
I think...
Aurora was only up 2 cents. You know, I get the sense that some of the smaller ones are acting better. Like we've seen North 44. Sorry,
44 North.
48 North.
44 North.
I'm sorry, Allison. But you know what? A lot of people now are going to know about your company.
They just won't be able to find it because they'll be thinking it's called 44 North.
You know, like the real big ones seem to be slowing down a bit.
Well, you know, Ed, let's just look at our indexes.
Look at your big index, look at the small index, see which is up bigger.
You know what? I think I'm going to look at the big, oh, you know what? Jesus, look at that. I can't see my Firefox on my NDI. I'm going to close down my NDI. I'm going to close down my desktop here. I'm not going to close my Chrome, and then I'm going to relaunch my NDI here, which is going to hopefully theoretically get me to a position where I can see what's going on with my Firefox. Now the Firefox opens up on the back of the NDI. We go over to the NDI and we, all right, look at that. All right, so these are the indexes where we can see that actually, Ed, the opposite is somewhat true today.
Pretty good observation by me there.
Well,
I got it exactly wrong.
Well, but look at up 0.58 and down 0.67 on the smaller, like down 0.6
Right.
on the venture, down 1.13%. Like the biggest loser among indexes is the small cap index, which is all the companies trading between 100 and 500 million. Now, this is not quite accurate because we haven't adjusted this since the end of last quarter. Because look, for example, that Green Thumb Industries is currently trading at 1.35 billion and should be on the large cap index. So all these indexes get readjusted at the end of March. But the interesting thing to me is how much changes in our indexes from quarter to quarter, just an indication of the extreme volatility inherent in the cannabis space.
Flower Corporation,
Yes.
which has about 80 million shares outstanding. I think they're pretty tightly, I think the structure is such that the few people own a lot of shares there. FLWR is up 13.67% today to 765, up 92 cents.
Wow.
Any reason for that?
I don't know. You're telling me. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at the chart. I mean, it's the RSI is up to 87.
Yeah.
It's well through the Bollinger Band onto the upside. And the band are very wide, which would suggest at some point they're going to narrow. You know, usually they go from narrow to wide to narrow. There you go. Look at that. Look at that move. And yesterday it got up here all the way back inside the band and now taken off again. Interesting.
That's on which one?
Flower Corporation.
So this is not Flower One.
I know this is the Flower Corporation.
How about that?
I think the gentleman's name is FLOWR, Flower.
Huh. His first name?
No, I think his first name's Tulip.
FSD Pharma.
I saw it at 21.5 cents today.
21 cents now, down 16%. Village Farms lost 4.29%, down to 17.42 or 78 cents. But well, 17.42.
Yeah, what do you think about Huge?
Huge? Well, I certainly concur with the symbol. It's got a huge stock float. And
I'm gonna put it up.
was a huge success for those who cashed out from above 50 cents and bought in at 13 cents. You know, but 1.3 billion shares out. You know, the problem with Huge is everybody knows they need to raise money, but how do you convince yourself to go into a deal and raise, you know, put in money at a premium to a share price that averaged, you know, 13 cents for the entire $1.3 billion float or lower? Like, how do you talk yourself into that? I think they got to bring the price down just so they can raise money.
You may have a good point there, but the 6-month chart tells me that we're breaking down. We had support. Whoop, let me just go back here. Yeah, I blew it. You blew it.
You blew it. Well, it's a good thing, Ed.
Now, you got to be careful with the sequence of events here.
Yes.
So look at this. Look like a nice base. Looked like, but most of those candles are red there. You see that in this little sequence here?
Yes.
And now, drop off. It may be coming by here shortly, but I got to tell you, and the RSI is down to 25. I'm sure this thing trades like water because of the large float. Yeah.
Let's take a look at exactly what the average trading volume is on this.
I'll bet you it's 5 million, at least 5 million shares.
You think?
How much you want to bet? Tilray's back over 70.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Tilray's back over $70.
$72.15. It got down to 62 or 63 the other day.
No kidding. Okay, so
these things really move around.
52-week range. 52-week range of FSD Pharma, 70 to 94 cents. 7 cents to 94 cents. Where's the 3-month average volume here? Oh, they don't have that on the first page anymore. Average volumes, 8 million shares a day.
You should have bet me. I was wrong. I said 5.
Well, but you probably would have never paid me.
As usual. Okay.
All right. Well, so do you know what's coming up tomorrow?
Tomorrow, Wednesday.
Wednesday. Yep. Wednesday's coming up. David Kideckel is going to be here. He's the analyst, the cannabis analyst at Alta Corp Capital, not just the cannabis analyst, but among other analysts, the cannabis analyst. Joe Delling is going to be here from CV Sciences, Inc. That was mentioned by, and they've just put out their financial results, which if we had time, we would talk to you further about, but we don't. Ryan Brown will be here. He's the CEO of North Bud Farms, Inc. This all tomorrow. Wednesday, big day.
Okay.
And there you have it. If you enjoy this show, I would like you to please hit the little red thing so that our subscriber numbers go up. Subscribe to the show, in other words, the subscriber button, I mean, not the red bell. Don't hit the red bell, because otherwise something pops up on your computer screen every time we're live. But we're live at the same time every day, 3 o'clock. So is it 3 o'clock?
Give or take. Usually we are on by 3.
Somewhere in there. Yeah, lots coming up. Lots to go. More private companies ahead. And that's our show for today. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.